You might see other kinds of resources that you were bringing up. You had a long list, so we might just keep adding to that list. Access to a high-quality principal, ability to attend a school that's socioeconomically diverse, on and on. So I think it opens up the possibilities should the plaintiffs win for more kinds of litigation like this. I also have concerns about the implementation should it succeed, as you alluded to. Just because we get a court decision doesn't mean we actually get change.
Right.
And so that will take, and if we have the political situation that we still have, and we have resistance to the ruling, I think there's some concern about what happens next. And so, as we saw with Brown versus Board of Education, we're still fighting that fight, and we're seeing resegregation in place and all that right now. So I have some skeptical views about the next steps should this case succeed. And to Susan's point about that we need an evaluation, I appreciate the endorsement of our work, but I think it's not enough. And I think, as I said before, just because we then have a fair system to evaluate our teachers doesn't mean we're going to get to improvement for some of those who are deemed as perhaps ineffective or who need more help. And so that's where I really do think we need more around the coaching and the supports for teachers. And I know that's also a priority in LAUSD and around the country, and I think our research really shows that we need to support teachers, provide them really good feedback from these evaluations, but also the resources and the professional development opportunities to actually make improvements.
Can I ask one question? Are you worried that this lawsuit demonizes teachers and allows people to say, the problem with the schools is not the other 99 items on your list. The problem with the schools is teachers in particular, tenured teachers in particular, the teachers union. Some there were some lousy teachers out there. There were some lousy lawyers out there. There were some lousy professors out there. But the overwhelming, you tell me, but the overwhelming majority of people I know who are in teaching are pretty good, working unbelievably hard and committed. And I wonder if this raises issues about whether they're being unfairly blamed when, inadequate teachers are not necessarily the biggest piece of the problem.
Yeah, I actually worry about that a lot. I happen to agree with you 100%. The overwhelming majority of teachers are just beyond amazing. I mean, my George is on the ground when I visit schools and teachers in very, we didn't talk about this. I mean, actually to teach is rocket science. To help a young person scaffold enough knowledge to understand how to read is probably the most complex task you're going to help any human do other than acquire speech. Incredibly difficult, and then you move on from there. I think that most of the kind of chatter is got nothing to do actually with the case itself. So you could spin a narrative, which I think would be very, very difficult. I equally worry about the fact that there's another side here with it. It's just about poor kids. We didn't have them, we wouldn't have these problems. And that the worry about what we need is to have less worry about this. And so I think both sides of that are to use your word, are really worrisome in the case.
I don't have a lot to add other than that I see how that, and I see that's been the spin from the sides of folks writing about the case over the past month. But I think if you think about some of the teachers who are less experienced, who got those risks and who were laid off, who were trying so hard, who were probably just as effective as some of those senior teachers, for them, this kind of ruling could actually really support those teachers. And it's about demonstrating that you were effective in the classroom. So I would hope that this case could advance the cause of supporting just teacher effectiveness and the importance of high-quality teaching without demonizing the teachers. That we sort of elevate the issue here, that it's not about seniority, that it's not about a certain amount of time, but it's really about demonstrating your ability to be effective in the classroom and how we support that through not just these laws, but other. Anyone that wants to ask a question in the audience? Yes. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Lisa Alva. I'm a teacher at Roosevelt High School. I have been a teacher for 16 years. And I'm so captivated by all of this conversation. Thank you so much for allowing me to come and to ask you a couple of questions. Professor Estrich made an interesting comment about who funded the Vegara trial and how it was private school interests. I'm very interested to know more about that, so I'd like to find out how to investigate. But
I mean, I don't know how you investigate. I just knew that was one of the questions that you referred to that kept getting answered, that they were, organizations based on something.
because that's kind of like your mother-in-law coming and telling you how to keep house, but we won't go there right now. I wanted to ask another question. At my school, we use student focus groups to get student input in terms of our curriculum, our leadership and governance, our instruction, our assessment, those things, and I find them very powerful as I run them myself. But I'm also a committee chair in UTLA, and the people that I interact with in UTLA and in trying to develop union membership are people that are more interested in a professional association rather than an industrial model union, or to some extent even a social justice union model. We're very interested in a professional association. And so my question for Professor Marsh is, you mentioned earlier that you had some ideas about governance and leadership and how that can improve the efficacy of the teaching profession. At my school, we are operating on a skeleton crew. It's very difficult for our administrators to get into classrooms. So I just want to make you aware of that and then ask for your ideas.
Okay, wow, a lot was packed into that. I wanted to speak to the issue of funding for a minute too. So there has been a lot of criticism around the funding of this. There was an organization that's being funded by a very wealthy Silicon Valley individual. And I guess I want to point back to the point that was made earlier by John, which was that we have money in politics and in education policy on all sides. And so labor unions have been giving donations to elected officials at the state and local level and for ballot initiatives, and if we think about lobbying. So I just think we should really pay attention to, if we're going to talk about the issue of money and its effect on education policy, we need to think broadly about all ways that money is getting into affecting our policies that are affecting your classroom, essentially. So I think that's important to keep in mind. Your point about governance and leadership changes, is that the question that you have? Or sort of what are some of the ideas? I was thinking more broadly about some of the issues, so I wanted to understand, and I'd be interested in Dr. Deasy's thoughts about how we can sort of prevent the political gridlock that seems to be occurring in our districts and in our state, where you have to feel that you need to go to the courts to get some of these issues addressed. So you mentioned in your testimony in Vegara that you've been trying to implement even the recommendations of Deasy to implement the evaluation system that you've been told to now implement, and that time and time again, I forget what your specific point was, that you've been challenged by every step you've made in trying to implement the evaluation. So I don't know, what is the answer for you in terms of what can you do as an individual superintendent when you aren't able to get anything sort of passed at the local level? So do we think we need mayoral control? Do we think that we need a more sort of market-based system that Paul Hill and others have talked about, which is a more sort of portfolio model where we try to decentralize a bit and we have sort of schools now more in charge of the hiring and all these issues, and that the district now plays more of a kind of coordinating function of oversight? There may be more drastic sort of models we might want to start thinking about for the governance of our schools. If we keep getting to the amount of money that's going into the school board elections and the gridlock that seems to be occurring, is it time for something different? That's what I'm trying to raise here.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to the question, obviously. I think that it's very complex, and I think organizations like LAUSD and UTLA are very complex organizations. And my sense is two things. One is most of the membership of UTLA is just working too hard to get involved in kind of this, some of the stuff that might or might not create gridlock. I mean, folks just are working themselves, to the bone and just it's a political organization just like LAUSD is at times a political organization. And I think what strikes me is that they're just, if you take your second example and you bring decision-making closer to students, I guess it would be an interesting strain of conversation to have. So could labor do the same thing? Could it bring its decision-making closer to the schools? So could schools actually have much more autonomy around the things which are centrally, quote, bargained? Because I would use your example, the student body and the conditions of those students and their challenges look very different at Roosevelt than they do Canova Park. They're not the same across the system this large. And I think that's a very interesting conversation to possibly have.
Bouchard, question?
Hi, David Zukovsky, recovering school board member. Thank you for that question, which is really the question I learned about is unintended consequences of policy. My question is to the two law professors on the panel. Yes, that's right. Anita Hill warned us that Clarence Thomas was both abusive and incompetent. What reforms would you put in place based upon one of 9 Supreme Court justices being allegedly incompetent, hasn't spoken in 23 years, and abusive, that wouldn't produce the unintended consequences of what Roseburg and the California Supreme Court experienced under the progressive democratic reforms of the turn of the century?
I'm not sure where that,
Clarence Thomas has tenure.
Yeah, he sure does.
Susan, do you want to take a quick pass
So
at
my
that one?
question is really, there can be good intentions, but the path may produce what the progressive did here in California, where we opened up election of our Supreme Court and lost a very visionary, much like the speech, a visionary Supreme Court here in California, based upon the election process. So I think it was touched by the panel. What happens after the court case is very important in terms of making sure that the best intentions are embodied in the unwritten implementation that could produce great results or unintended consequences.
Susan, want to take a quick pass at it, and you can also pass on the question.
The purpose of judges having life tenure was to have people like Earl Warren, all right, a Republican governor from California, who, with life tenure, looking at a situation, changed America. Or William J. Brennan of New Jersey, another Republican appointee to the United States Supreme Court, who with life tenure and integrity changed his views and became one of the court's leading liberals. Or Hugo Black, formerly, some said, a KKK supporter, who later became the greatest champion of First Amendment freedoms. The purpose of tenure is to ensure that good teachers at every level know that they will not be subject to arbitrary intimidation and layoffs because they are doing their best at speaking their views and addressing situations. And I guess my only answer would be to say, and that's why I pointed to your work, I know there is a tenure, and teachers' unions are political, as you know, hot buttons, and that's why I was asking about demonization. If we're going to move against tenure in any way, shape, or form, change it, restrict it, eliminate it, seems to me it's critical that we have ways to fairly evaluate teachers, because I'm one of the old people now, I used to be one of the young people, and I do remember when, the NEA Teamsters. But the reality was that it was the only protection against arbitrariness, which came for reasons that were often unfair. So my answer simply is to encourage, especially those who are supporting lawsuits like this, to pay as much attention to what the new system looks like and how to make it right as they do to what's wrong with the old system.
Great, so I think we have time for one more question. So, sorry, we have a reception at 6, people will be around.
Yeah, you delayed the question, and I know a good part of the reason why you're making sure I don't, because I'll ask a real question. And I'll make a real statement. I know how you guys roll. Ask Deasy what he does to me at the board.
One more.
They hacked my computer in public, people, on television. That's against federal law.
Thank you, the young man in blue.
You don't care.
I think my question's real. See.
So if the plaintiffs were to win and the tenure process were to be adjusted, what would that ideally entail? And would school site administrators, who up until this point may look for one or two big indicators of effectiveness, be equipped in terms of time and resources to actually evaluate new teachers in this ideal framework?
I mean, I think it's a really important question for which there's no path that was laid out in the trial that would be able to answer that. So I think, like Mr. Takashi, the subject of tenure wasn't, as I followed the trial, whether we should have it or not. That wasn't the case. As a matter of fact, both sides argued strongly that it should be in place. It was the length of time to determine it, not if it should happen. And I don't have the slightest idea what this judge would do, nor would I hazard a guess.
You guys run a joke here.
Excuse me?
They run a joke here.
I'm one of the
In most
managers.
cases,
You're running a joke.
weighty
This
and
is,
significant.
you don't have to be here.
I came here for a reason. This is a public meeting, dude. Get your stuff straight.
This is private property.
Judges have
It's a public
tenures
meeting.
which court rulings
I have permission to be here.
Okay, it's
You're not following your own
I'm one of
rules.
the managers, thank you.
So whatever
You need to calm
body
down
should
or I
make the
will
collective
escort you
action.
out.
So the body here is the General Assembly.
This is not a real
Since
discussion.
they create the law, they can amend,
I'm done.
adjust, or
I don't have to
modify
talk to
it.
you.
Fine.
To be within the framework of what was unconstitutional.
I'm doing it out of courtesy.
So I think it's a misnomer to say this would be about
Hardly.
striking down tenure.
One more.
I think it is that.
I think I'll take care of it myself.